Welcome to lesson 32. This is a lesson that I probably should have done a long time ago. Probably right after we talked about sandpaper, because sanding creates dust. And this lesson is about dust management in your shop. So what I'm going to do is take you through some things we have here at our studio and give you some various different options. First thing I know you all have is one of these shop vacs of some sort. They're great for getting the big hunks up off the floor, and they will pick up some of the larger debris. Remember, dust and particles, the ones that hit the floor are not the ones that damage your lungs. It's the ones that do not hit the floor. The ones that are suspended in air that we suck in and breathe. So let's get the big stuff up off the floor. Let me show you the inside of one of these. There's a filter cartridge, and the filter cartridge then clears the air before it's exhausted. I want to show you this one specifically because this is what happens when you don't clean them. I know you empty this, but these filters get plugged up. Now there's two aspects of plugging up. There's a good one and a bad one. The good one is, as the filter gets more plugged, it becomes more efficient in sucking up finer and finer particles. The bad news is it becomes less efficient in terms of volume sucked through. So these filters need to be taken off, unscrewed from the bottom, removed, cleaned, and they can be reassembled. But eventually, after several cleanings, they may develop small tears or rips and need to be physically replaced. So this is not dust collection in the sense that I want to talk about today, but this is first step in keeping your place neat and clean. Next place I want to talk about is personal protective gear. And by that I mean you can buy a Trend Air Shield face system that has a fan and a filter system in it that sucks down to 1 micron. That's great, but they're expensive. Short of something like that, the minimum needs to be something like this. This is a particular brand I happen to use. It's a Moldex is the brand, but the key thing in this description is the words N95. Meaning meets a federal standard for sucking up particles down to 1 micron, the ones that do damage to your lungs. You can identify good ones from less expensive ones because the better ones have 2 straps. So when you put these things on, they fit to the face better. This is form fit around the nose. Some have a relief valve like this one for when I exhale, the air comes out much more readily. Some do not have that. That's not a critical component. Nice snug fit around the face. If you wear glasses, they'll fit up over this thing very nicely. I have a couple boxes of these at home, and I use them over and over until a strap breaks or they get really dirty. But an N95 level, several brands on the market. Personal protective gear. I'll put it back in the box. This is my box, so I know that's my mask. Now let's talk a little bit about dust collectors, the devices that you have hopefully in use when you're sanding. I'm going to start off with the bottom. Now this unit is fairly similar to a number of units you can see on the market from a number of different vendors. They look the same. There's a squirrel cage fan. I have tongue tile sometimes. Sucks the air in here and blows it over into a bag and collects. Now the difference in these is huge. They're all about the same price, but some are a heck of a lot better than others. If you have a nylon bag out here, it is not going to collect really fine particles. You need a felted bag like this one from Penn State Industries that will suck down to 1 micron again. If I pull this off, there's a small grill in here. And if you accidentally start picking up chips with this thing, what will happen is this grill will plug, because this is not a chip collector, this is a dust collector. The cheaper ones that do not have the felted bag and do not go down to 1 micron, do not buy. This one, looking like many of the others, As I recall, it's around 250 bucks. Fairly quiet in operation, light enough that it can be transported from one location to another. It came with casters, so in your shop you could literally roll it around. We choose not to use them here. We have them in a number of different workstations behind me and throughout the studio for when we get down to needing to sand a project. So this is the lowest level you can go. Now the dust collectors get bigger, and they have one major characteristic, and that is called CFM, cubic feet per minute. That is the amount of air that can be taken into the unit. So this one is going to clean up an area very close to the end of that hose very well. But if I need to clean up a larger area, I probably would add something like this. Something that will focus the air into the hose. But as these areas become larger, I need to be able to suck more air in, and this lower unit of 600 CFM may not be sufficient. The general ones that stand upright, the smallest ones generally start at about 650 cubic feet per minute air sucking, and they go on up. The bigger the flow of air, the more expensive the units. So let me take you from this one to the next size up and show you a couple of modifications that you can add to yours to improve the quality of, maybe you have a fairly inexpensive vertical unit. But I'm going to show you some ways to make it even more effective. We're going to step to another area in the studio, and I'm going to show you one of the other units we have hooked up to our bandsaws to show you where those modifications are. Back in a second. We've gone to a corner in the studio, and I'm standing in front of a jet unit that connects to all of our bandsaws in here for that purpose. But I want to show you several features about this that apply to smaller as well as larger units. First of all, I said we want to get down to 1 micron, and if you buy a unit that has 2 felt bags, one on the bottom and one at the top, you'll find you meet that 1 micron requirement, and probably while the unit is clean, will be able to suck at the maximum CFM your unit's rated for. The next step up, and I did this at home, my unit worked pretty good, and I eventually purchased one of these kind of units, a canister, and replaced the top felt bag with that, and I almost doubled the flow. Now, what's inside of here? It's like that fiber filter in that shop vac. It goes down to 1 micron, and it's pleated all the way around. Creates a huge surface area. So the air comes in through that pleated unit, dumps the trash down here, and exits the clean air through this. Huge surface area, so as it begins to get clogged with dust, it still has plenty of working volume. Clean it. There's a handle, mine has a crank on it, this one has a lever. And by rotating this, you might actually hear it. There's a flapper inside that's going around and hitting that fiber as it goes around, knocking the dust back down in here to the bag. So on my unit at home, if I sucked fibers into here, I'd have to empty this bag with some frequency. First upgrade you might want to consider is finding a canister unit that will fit your dust collector and replacing the top bag with a canister. If the bottom bag is nylon, replace it with a plastic. The nylon's going to let too much particles out. Next thing I've done at home and here at the shop is I've gone and added a second stage. You've heard about 2-stage dust collectors, and this is what a 2-stage unit is. The unit comes in, flows into a separator. In this case, it's a garbage can. The larger particles fall down into the can. The finer suspended particles continue on into the dust collector. We've emptied the bag on this unit maybe twice a year. We empty the can because it picks up larger pieces a number of times each year. At home, when I'm sanding, All of the fine particles end up here. When I'm dealing with larger particles, maybe cleaning up around the lathe, all those particles end up in the separator. So all I have to do is to take that garbage can and empty it. Now, second upgrade to your system is adding a second stage. And that can be as cheap as buying a steel or metal garbage can. Metal, not plastic. Plastic could collapse. And one of these lids, which is a two-stage separator. So all I've done is hooked up the input here and the output back here. It's a tremendously inexpensive way. Now, if you want to back up around your lathe and pick up the particles off the floor, knowing you have a second stage, easy to collect, easy to empty. And this then doesn't have to get touched very often. Another upgrade you might want to consider, this unit has a built-in remote. I'm not going to bring it all the way up because it makes a lot of noise. That's really convenient because this may not be right next to me where I'm working. And sometimes I feel too lazy to walk across the studio to turn a switch on. So at home, I have one of these hooked up to the outlet and the dust collector plugged into that unit. This is called a Long Ranger, and they're available in 110 and in 220 versions, and they have an on button, and an off button. This stays right next to my lathe. I have another one of these on the other side of my studio at home near some other equipment, so I don't even have to walk around to pick up the remote. I have multiple remotes. I'm more likely to turn on the dust collector and use it when I can reach to the remote instantly. Second upgrade. While we're here, I want to talk a little bit about plumbing. And then I'm going to show you a system where all this is integrated into one unit, as many of the larger systems are. But let me talk about plumbing. I'm going to step right over here for a second and show you. I pulled this off of my machine at home. This is a gate valve. It comes up, spring-loaded. It latches to one side when it's open. When I'm not using it, well, I wanted that off anyway. It drops down. Well, I'll figure out how to work it backwards. Box, down, and then there's a knob here. When I tighten that, it pulls this gate this way. So the flow of air has to be this direction. So this closes down tight to seal that. Now the reason I'm showing you this one, there are plastic ones that are very inexpensive, and they're these with springs and metal. Buy the best gate you can get. The plastic ones will accumulate debris in this area, and when you try to close it, it will not close all the way, and all of a sudden you start having a series of leaks around the shop. Or you take them out and get a toothpick in there and start cleaning the chassis. This one doesn't load up. And just the trick is to be sure to hang it in the direction that the flow is going this direction, so that it pulls this shut against the face rather than the other way. I have a PVC piece of pipe here because this slides onto another piece of plumbing in my shop. And that leads me to talking about plumbing, which is where I'm going to go next. I'm going to show you what we have hooked up to our bandsaws here in the classroom and tell you about the good news and the bad news, and now we've got that hooked up. So let me go over here to the wall and show you our hookup. I just turned around the corner, and I want to show you the plumbing that we have here. It's not the best, but it gives me a chance to talk about what would be better as well as what we've done. So here's the tubing coming from the dust collector towards my bandsaws. The problem with this kind of tubing, well, good news and bad news. Good news is it's very flexible and I can move it any place I want. I can eliminate sharp corners, which is good. The bad news, it's corrugated, and a corrugated tube is going to create turbulence in the airflow and slow down the total amount of CFM that you get at the far end of the system. This would have been better to have been replaced with something that's solid and smooth walled, but that's what we've got. Here's a valve coming off, and you see this is coming off at an angle, not 90 degrees. If it was 90 degrees, we're going to have a sudden change in direction of the airflow, more turbulence, more places for particles to accumulate and maybe bind in the system. All your joints should be soft, radiused, or at an angle as we have here on these various different drops. So we've gone through that to, I'm actually using 4-inch sewer pipe here. Good news, it's cheap, it's easy to plug together. It's smooth bore, which means it's going to create a nice flow of air. Bad news, it's plastic. The problem with plastic, you can see by the accumulation of dust on the surface, it develops a certain amount of static electricity from dust moving through the tube. So what you need to do if you're going to use plastic piping is to run a bare copper wire all the way through your tubing from one end back to your dust collector. Attach the wire to your dust collector only at one end, not at both, just at the one end. It becomes sort of like a lightning rod, accumulating static electricity that might build up and discharges it against the metal case of your dust collector. In the Midwest, many times in the summer we hear of explosions in silos, and that typically is wheat dust that's accumulated in the silo that has generated a static charge and ignited. Same thing is possible here. So plastic pipes needs a wire run through it, grounded at one end back at the dust collector to discharge any static. If you have the money and the time, you can buy metal tubing for your dust collector, 4-inch or 6-inch size, and connect that to your system. And that's fine because the metal itself discharges the static electricity, so there's not a problem. But you can see the static that's built up around this unit just sucking from this short distance. The other thing we have is every one of the drop is at 45 degrees. There's no 90-degree curves into any of the system. Each drop has one of these metal valves, gates on it. And for this to work most efficiently, all gates but the one in use need to be closed. It's not a big deal. If you wanted to, you can get electrical gates that will turn on when you turn on the piece of equipment. They are tied to each piece of equipment and will automatically open. Kind of expensive, and I can walk around for a few minutes without spending that kind of money. At my lathe, coming right off of the gate to the front of my lathe, I have this piece of tubing. It allows me to put dust collection right at the point. If I'm sanding a pin, I can get this right up behind it. If I'm sanding a bowl, I can move it to another location. This is just for collection at one point. You can get this in plastic like this. You can get it in metal foil such as is used with dryers. And to fasten this on, I have a clamp that has a thumb screw. So this goes around the valve gate, and then I can tighten this down to make sure it stays perfectly snug. This is only used on a very short distance from the gate to the back of my lathe spindle. Is probably no more than 24 inches. Put this any place I need it. So we talked about some improvements and some things that you can do in setting up your system. I've talked to you about how to take a single stage dust collector, convert it into 2-stage. If you go to some of the woodworking dealers, you'll find some beautiful 2-stage units that do all this stuff, self-clean their filters, provide a second stage, even have little electric lights that come on to tell you when the bag is getting full. Well, they're expensive, but they're really nice. But let me show you a fairly inexpensive version of that that contains all the right components together. I've got to step to another portion of the shop to show you that. Be back in a second. Right. I wanted to show you one other self-contained 2-stage dust collector. It's an older model, but it works just perfectly. So you can see all the components. That's why I want to show it to you. So the dust comes in through the hose, into the can, and through the circular squirrel cage fan, and out to a felted bag. Remember I talked about felting. Looks like this one's running. Given dust collectors and how noisy they are, that's pretty quiet. The key here is that if we do suck chips in, they're always going down into this barrel. The barrel's on casters, so I can actually move this around the shop pretty easily. And I'm going to step in front of you for a second, but the tube comes out of here. We have a long hose connected to a pedestal here that can be moved back and forth in front of the lathe. So it's another way of doing dust collection. Now, as I said, these systems go up to multi-$1,000s depending on the CFM, the number of stages, the number of whistles and bells that have been added to it, and so on. So we talked about cleaning stuff up off the floor, your shop vac. We talked about PPEs in terms of dust collection with a dust mask. We talked about collection of dust at the lathe and in the shop. But even with the lathe running and the best dust collection system going, there's still going to be particles that get away from you, and they're in the air. And this is where we talk about these air circulators that I'm going to show you next. In my home shop, I have one unit. Here in our teaching studio, we have 2 units. And I'm going to step over there and show you what they're like. Mine are smaller than this at home, but the components and the functions are still exactly the same. So I'm going to move one more time and show you our air scrubber. Here's the last stage in dust collection for your shop. One of the things that you need to do is take care of that ambient dust that's not being collected by any of the other means we've already talked about. And this is an air filtration system. They come in all different sizes. What I'm showing you here is one of the larger versions. They actually go even larger than this for industrial applications. Mine at home is probably only that tall, maybe only that long. It's much physically smaller. Well, what this does is suck air into this end, send it through a pre-filter, and then into a series of 1 micron HEPA filters in here. These are the bags. And exhaust out the other end. So this pre-filter can be taken out, replaced. As you can see from this one, it's pretty darn dirty. It's time to be changed. But this is collecting the larger particles. Once that's done, then these bags in here collect rest of the particles and circulate them on out to the shop. I have 2 in here. This one is faced this direction and it's fairly low. There's another one on the other side of the shop, very high, faced the opposite direction, so that in this room I create a flow, a circular flow of air, and over a period of time we can get it clean. At the end of a class or the end of your time in the shop, you can turn this on, and the control panel here gives me some options. When I finish at home, many times I'll put it onto the 2-hour mode, turn the on button, and walk away. After 2 hours, it automatically will shut down. 4 hours and 8 hours are the other cycles. I can set it on low, medium, or high fan velocity. So you have a lot of control. Now this one's easy to reach, but the one on the other side of the shop is not. So I have a remote control. The one I have at home in my home studio is hanging on the ceiling in the garage and off center, not in the center, but to one side, again to create that circular flow throughout the room. And again, to reach it, I need a remote control. With this, I can select the time, 2, 4, or 8 hours, the speed, low, medium, or high, off, on. And it's very, very convenient. They are not expensive, but this is one way to keep the air in your studio clean, either while you're working or after you leave. So, another option on dust collections, and they come in various different sizes. I hope this video has helped you think about protecting your lungs, protecting your equipment, and doing a much more enjoyable job of turning. We'll see you in the next video.